Well, welcome to this next video on the nowRail model railway control system, and today we're going to be looking at how to connect to the DCC EX base station. So for those of you who have never come across DCC EX, DCC EX is a system, a fully functioning DCC base station that you can basically build yourself. Now, the version that I'm using under this homemade shield here, that was a temporary bodge job that's only lasted 6 years, that is sitting on top of an Arduino Uno, and it is sending signals to this IBT2 motor driver. And that is all I require for my DCC base station. Basically, you have a 5 amp power supply that comes in, and the 2 leads then go out to the track. Now, these days, DCC EX has lots of extra features, so they tend to advise you to use the Mega 2560, but my system is still old enough and I don't use many of the new functions, so I can still get away with an Uno. So that is the base station, and today we're going to look at how nowRail can send accessory and loco commands to the DCC system. Now, as always, if you follow the link to the Digital Town resource page, you will come to this page, and if you scroll down, you will find, he says looking for it, the DCC EX connection. Click on that and you have now all the resources that you need. There is a link to the DCC EX webpage. It looks like that one. It's full of information, everything you need to know, obviously, about DCC EX. Now, the system I'm using an Uno and an IBT2 motor driver. That means that my DCC system has cost me, just checking the prices here, I am looking at, if I buy it on eBay, I'm probably looking at around £16. If I'm buying it on AliExpress, it's going to be even less. Even with an Arduino Mega, that and the motor driver are going to set you back, certainly off AliExpress, £15. That is not bad for a fully functioning DCC base station. And when I say fully functioning, it does the lot, and a lot of things that a lot of other manufacturers do not do. So a very useful system if you want to take a look at that. Right, let's get to the layout. So a quick clip from the layout. As you can see, I'm using just a nowRail controller, and as I press the button, mine turns on the DCC power. Now, this traverser is a DCC accessory decoder, and the loco is also running off a DCC decoder. If the loco looks familiar, that's because it was based on Toby the tram engine from Thomas the Tank Engine. And for those of us who live in the UK, of course, that is based on a real prototype. Now, nowRail is not necessarily based on DCC EX. You can use it with analog, dead rail, there's an NCE cab bus system. But today I'm just going to be looking at how to send commands from nowRail to DCC EX. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, if you've got an existing layout and you're using DCC EX, then changing everything over to nowRail in one go is a big job. And if something works, leave it working. That's what I've done with my traverser. That is a DCC accessory decoder, and until I build a new one, probably next year, that one is going to maintain a DCC decoder system, and for that, it just receives the command from DCC EX. The same with my locos. I happen to like DCC, and therefore my locos are all chipped, and DCC EX is my base station of choice. That's my personal choice. Now, let's have a look at how we connect all this together. There are 2 parts of the connection. There is the software side, and there is the, if you like, the wiring side. So we'll take a look at the wiring first. The wiring couldn't get much simpler than that, could it? So you have an ESP32. You need to make sure that it is a version that has a TX2 pin. That is serial 2. Now the standard 30-pin dev module, the one that usually has vroom written on it, that one has TX2, and that is ideal, and that is what I've got on the workbench. That connection comes from the TX2 and it goes to the RXO pin on the Arduino, which is, if you like, bottom right when this is sort of facing the other way. We've then got the only other connection, which is a ground connection. Now, although I am using serial 2, you'll notice that I am only transmitting to DCC EX. It is possible to receive information back, but the Arduino is 5 volts, the ESP32 is 3.3 volts. So if you send a transmission from 5 volts to 3.3 volts, unless you put things like voltage dividers in place, you're going to have a bad day for the ESP32. So nowRail only requires the TX2 connection and the ground connection. So if we think the wiring is easy, I can tell you that the software side is even easier. So you just take your nowRail sketch, and if you remember, we created in the getting started a nowRail master clock, and I'm now going to use that sketch. The reason I'm using the master clock sketch is on my system, I like to have the master clock on the DCC EX base station board, because on my layout the clock runs when DCC is turned on, because my layout doesn't run without it. So you take the standard sketch, and then all you need to do is go over to nowRail user setup H. Once you get onto this, we have all the information that you will have set up earlier when you set up your standard sketch. That is your channel, whether you're having encryption, and whether you're going to allow seeking for Wi-Fi channel changes. I've got the master clock on this board. That is not compulsory. You can have the master clock on another board. Serial RX2 and TX2 are both uncommented by default in nowRail, and the default values are 16 and 17. Now those are the pins on the ESP32 vroom board. So if you're using a different type of board and you're using different pins, you will need to change those values to your new pin values. Now the only other thing you've then got to do is come down to the DCC EX serial communication, uncomment that line, you're done. That's now finished. And what this now does, just to explain these two lines, one of them is the DCC EX instruction that is sent across, and the other one is just sending out the serial information, just so you can see any commands within the serial monitor on your ESP32. Now, going back to the resource page, there is one other command that you might want to add into your code, and this depends on how you have DCC EX set up. So nowRail is able to send power commands to DCC EX. When I showed you the first video where I pressed the start button on my hand controller, that sends a command to DCC EX to start, if you like, start the system, start sending DCC signals through the track, turn the power on, etc. Now you can set that up automatically within DCC EX. I didn't, because I had the controller that was going to send that command. So if you haven't set your DCC EX system to auto power on, you might want to add this line. Well, you will want to add this line into your sketch, and this sends the power command, basically turn yourself on. That's what this command is about. So let's just take a quick look at how it works. For DCC EX, it is a very simple command. Turning the system on, you send a 1. Turning the system off, you send a 0. Now you'll see that there is a DCC address, speed, and DCC direction. This is because this function not only works with the DCC EX system, but it is a general nowRail command. So if you're sending the command to an NCE CAD bus system, you need to send over the address of the loco, the speed, and the direction. Just a weird way, the way that CAD bus works. But for DCC EX, it's literally send the 1 for turning it on, send the 0 for turning the system off. So going back to my sketch, I've deliberately configured DCC EX so it doesn't auto power on. So if I go over to my setup, I have then added this line here. So if you remember from the master clock, I've got this board set as the master clock. So I'm starting the system up. I'm then sending over the clock speed that I want. So I'm setting it to 1, which is normal speed. And now I am going to turn on DCC EX. So let's have a look at that in action. So let's take a look at this starting up. So on the right hand screen here, we have the output from the Arduino Uno that is running DCC EX. On the left hand side, I have this ESP32 here that is going to send a nowRail command. So let's just connect that and watch it start up. So you can see plenty of activity as soon as it starts up. Let's take a look at what happened. So on startup, it started the clock. It's then sent the power command, and we can see here we have a now power command. Now this item in the brackets here is the power command for DCC EX. This is actually the command that's sent over serial to start up the system. Now the first thing you might notice is just how many times this power command has been called. It is a number of times. I think it's about 5 that it actually does it. Now the reason for doing this is that when a power command is sent, you might think, well, you only need to send it once. Well, that's fine if you're turning on DCC EX, but the same power command is used for turning off DCC EX or the NCE CAD bus if you're connected to an NCE system. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure was that the commands are sent multiple times in case there was any interference, because turning the system on, you can just press the button again or send the command again. Turning it off, if you've ever had a DCC loco go out of control, now and again you get the odd situation where you get a runaway and it doesn't matter what you do with the controller, that loco is not stopping. So being able to send a, if you like, a power off command is quite useful, and you really want to make sure that it gets through first time. So nowRail sends it about 5 times just to make sure that DCC EX got it. Although, let's be honest, it usually gets the message first time. Better safe than sorry. Now, moving over to the DCC EX side, you can see that that command was sent here, and we can see the power command is being received. And that's about it. You know, basically it got, was it 5 commands to turn the power on? That's it. DCC EX is now running. Now going back to the workbench, on the last video that I did, I showed how we could control different items, different accessories on nowRail via these buttons. We were sending over different commands, and that was being picked up by this board. Now what I'm going to do is, instead of sending those commands to this board over here, we're going to send it to DCC EX. And to do that is very, very simple. I'm just going to unplug this one. And that's about it. That's the only change I'm going to make. Now going back to the nowRail page, if you missed that particular video, It's this one here on standard pin functions, and I'm going to be using the code that I used in that tutorial. So let's get into that now. So on the right hand side we have the sketch for that ESP-32S3. Going back to the web camera, that is this board down here, and then on the left hand side I have my DCC EX connection. So that board on the right, we set up some standard pins for accessory 100, 101 and 102, and then some control panel stuff. So that's all running away nicely. Now let's see what happens when we start to send the commands. So as I reach over and press this button, we can see that a command has been sent. Let's just stop the scrolling. So the command that was sent over was accessory number 102 was told to move to direction 1. I then got a panel response and I've had a panel update. Now what has then happened here, let's press that button again so that we can see. That meant that this green LED came on. This is, if you like, for the mimic panel. That means that it has received a command, that the command has been received somewhere else. And when we look over here on the left hand side, we can see that that instruction has been received. And then we see this weird piece of code here. Now this is actually the command that has been sent to DCC EX. Now you might think, hang on a minute, we sent to accessory 102 instruction 1. What's all this about? Well, nowadays in DCC EX, they've added some extra functions to make life a little bit easier to send the commands over. There used to be a way that the commands were sent over, and I still use that way. The code works perfectly well. So this is an older method within DCC EX, but that little bit of code there means accessory 102 move to instruction 1, if you like, position direction 1. So now that's all working and I can continue to change different accessories by just pressing the different buttons. And as you can see, all the commands are now being sent through to DCC EX. So those would now be picked up with an appropriate DCC accessory decoder on the layout. Now the only thing to be aware of is that nowRail has a far larger range of DCC accessory addresses than DCC is able to handle. So with nowRail, basically, I've got values into the 5,000, 6,000. As long as it's an integer, nowRail doesn't care. However, with DCC EX and other DCC systems, there is a maximum address limit. It varies slightly from manufacturer to manufacturer, but it all is around the 2,000 mark. So with nowRail, it will only pass a command over to a DCC system if that accessory address is less than 2,000. So now, just for a sort of a final demo, what I've now done is plugged in the nowRail accessory decoder. Now, as I press the buttons now, we can see that that is now receiving the commands, but at the same time, those commands are also being sent to DCC EX. So it's actually possible to have a command sent to both systems at the same time. So you can use nowRail to complement a DCC system to add features while still being able to control your standard DCC accessory and loco decoders. Now going back to the workbench, this is where things start to get quite interesting. As I said earlier, you can create yourself a DCC EX system for under £25. It's pretty cheap. If you then add in the parts that you need to make a nowRail controller, let's say we're going to do that for about £20, that actually means that you can have a full wire-free controller for your DCC EX system. You can have your full locos, your various accessories. It does consisting, it does everything you need, but it means you could build your complete system for about £45. So that's not bad for a complete DCC system. Now, the other thing to think about with that DCC system, most sort of starter things that you get, like the NCE power cab, they're just a 1.5 amp system. That system that I've got on the workbench right now is a full 5 amp system. The controller, you can add as many as you want. DCC EX doesn't have limits on the number of locos, like the sort of starter sets tend to have from commercial units. So for something like that, you've got a full commercial system for under £50. That's pretty good going, and it's one of the things that's very impressive about the DCC EX system. So I'm going to finish there today. As you can see, nowRail connects very well with DCC EX, and if you've got any questions about how it all works, please leave some comments under the video or email me off the Digital Town website. As for questions about DCC EX, I am no expert in that. I've been using it for years, but it's got more functions than I ever use. The DCC EX team have a Discord channel and various other things, and those guys are very active and are more than willing to help with any questions you have in setting up your DCC EX system. So I hope that's been helpful in how to connect nowRail to DCC EX. And I'm now going to do an update on the video on how to get commands out of other DCC systems and put those into nowRail. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.